So as Act Two begins, we get a scene that builds up towards the murder of Duncan. The majority of it, and certainly the bit that most people seem to remember, is Macbeth on his way to kill him, and then the dagger soliloquy, which draws him into actually committing it. And certainly the end of this scene, that's it. He's on his way to do it. Next time we see him, it's done. But don't forget as well that this is a key scene in terms of Banquo and their relationship. And we'll look at that in a minute. Starts with Banquo on watch with Fleance. Apparently on watch because he doesn't want to go to sleep because of his dreams of the witches. So he talks about how dark it is. He doesn't want to sleep because he dreams of the witches. When Macbeth enters, he then lies to Banquo, telling him he doesn't think about the witches. We know he certainly does because we've just had an entire act of discussing whether he's going to act on what they've said. Then he tests out, a very important bit here we'll come to and look at closely. He tests out whether Banquo will be willing to do something for him. And Banquo says he will as long as it doesn't go against his loyalty to the king. A very key bit in there before we get the soliloquy of the ghostly dagger which leads him towards Duncan. Okay, so if we think about these big issues that are always identified, the key here are certainly Macbeth, he's right at the heart of it. Certainly the supernatural, because obviously we get another clear example of them, potentially, it depends how you interpret it, with the flying dagger. And then ambition and loyalty, not just because of Macbeth on his way to commit murder, but also because of how Banquo reacts. So let's start with the exchange between Banquo and Macbeth. The bit at the beginning where Banquo talks to Fleance and comments on how he doesn't want to go to sleep, etc. Very important, but I think this is far more likely to come up and be an extract for you. So, we've got the lie. Macbeth responding to his friend, just the two of them there, with a straightforward lie. I mean, why not? Why say that? Why not come up immediately with saying, yes, it is strange, isn't it? Is it trying to push away and hide the fact of what he's about to do? Well, then he turns around and changes this idea, saying, okay, I don't think of them, but I'd like to talk to you about it. And Banquo's happy to talk about it, but Macbeth goes that step further. And this, I think, is a really, really important moment. If you shall cleave to my consent when it is it shall make honour for you. Now look at the detail that Shakespeare's used here. This conditional sentence of, if you do this, then this will happen. But he's very, very vague about it. It's quite clear Macbeth is testing whether he can bring Banquo into this. So Banquo is clearly a close enough friend that he thinks that he might well join him. And obviously he'd be stronger with Banquo at his side. But it is very much Macbeth at the lead. If you shall cleave to my consent. Think about cleaving, like kind of splitting in half, cutting away from where you are. Cleaving with my consent, if you will allow that to come through you, then it will make honour for you. So he's going down the line of honour. That's his reward. You could gain from this. But he's definitely approaching this idea of the fact that this will require cleaving. It will require a clean separation. Now, he is to understand this fairly well, because his response is pretty much yes, as long as it doesn't go against my loyalty. Now, why would he say that if he didn't get the idea that it might go against his loyalty? He starts with that. It will make honour for you. Well, as long as I don't lose any honour in seeking to augment it to put it in place. All right? As long as I don't lose any honour, but I actually manage to keep my bosom franchised and my allegiance clear. His allegiance is clear. I am loyal to the king. So as long as I don't lose any honour, as long as you're not suggesting to me to change my allegiances, then I shall be counselled. And there's the heart of it. As I say, the question for me always is, one, why does Banquo say that? He must suspect Macbeth. whether because of the way that he's speaking, whether because of his knowledge of Macbeth, or whether just because of the idea that this might happen at that time, you know. Whichever way it is, he sees that as a problem straight away. And the fact he talks about keeping his bosom franchised, his very heart, his self, it's not just I show loyalty on the surface, that is how I feel. So consider the lie. Consider what he would actually ask him at that point if Banquo had said, yeah, okay. And consider the idea about Banquo's suspicions and what he thinks might be about to happen. Okay, so the key moment, the second key moment, is the beginning of the dagger speech here. Now, the dagger soliloquy is one of the best known soliloquies, but it's actually one of the more difficult ones to talk about because in reality it's just a succession of Macbeth saying, is this real or is this not? There's obviously slightly different versions, but it's tough to talk about. I think the main thing often revolves around not whether it is real or not, but if you do take it on board, it's Macbeth's attitude towards it, and it's if you do suggest it is the supernatural, how the supernatural is working. Now, first of all, notice he's addressing the dagger straight away. That's what we've highlighted here, these thous. He is talking to the dagger itself, as though he is addressing the supernatural itself, and asks it questions. What are you? You're taking me where I want to go. I can't do this with you. And then he uses a couple of imageries, epithets if you like. He calls it a fatal vision. So already he's identifying it as something he sees that is leading him towards committing murder. And this phrase, a dagger of the mind, as the alternative, is very interesting. Not just I've invented it in my mind, but think about that, a dagger of the mind. Is that suggesting, I think what a dagger does, a dagger, small, almost like a small sword, used for murdering close up, easy to maneuver and use. Is he suggesting his mind has daggers? Is he suggesting his mind is stabbing and attacking himself? Maybe. And things around it. Is he talking about his state of mind? Is he talking about the idea that it is a dagger for the mind? It is like stabbing him in the mind, attacking him physically that way. This idea of daggers becomes so important at this point because remember, daggers are an assassin's tool. They're easily hidden. They can be used close up. And then, what have we got? We've got the dilemma. And the paradoxes. I don't have it, I can't grab you, and yet I can still see you. Can I feel you as well as see you? My eyes are either the fools of the other senses, or they're better than all of them. The difference between vision, it's all about vision this. It's all about sight. The difference between his sight and the other senses. Now again, take that a little bit further and think, why sight? Why is vision so significant here? We've had plenty of things about the dark hiding what they're trying to do, both from Macbeth and Lady Macbeth. Why such a focus on that? So again, think about that idea, addressing the dagger directly. What's the impact of that? And then the big question, is this a supernatural intervention? Or are we seeing Macbeth's state of mind? Is this another example of supernatural forces making sure Macbeth does what he's going to do by creating a dagger that he can see that leads him towards it? Or is it just the state he's got to at that point? Now the final key moment, short one, again, I don't really imagine this coming up as an extract, but you never know. I think a section in which Macbeth is really beginning to lose control in some way, where he starts at this point to talk about the idea of the stones, the flagstones on the ground, prating, chattering, gossiping of where he is. This fear of being caught, really, where he's imagining the earth being against him, the very earth. And leading to its conclusion. While I threat, he lives. Something that's going to come back again and again in the play. While I'm talking, I'm not actually doing what I need to do. And of course this goes too far later, where he decides he's not going to think anymore, he's just going to act. Because, as he says here, words give cold breath to the heat of deeds. Words cool down the heat of deeds. Now, first of all, that's suggesting the idea that this is a hot, rash deed. This is a passionate deed. It's not cold reasoning. It isn't something that he's doing because he coldly thinks it's what I need to do to get away with. And the fear he has that heat might go. And finally, the roll of the bell. Now, we know already that this is Lady Macbeth ringing a bell to say, I've finished. I've done my part of the job. But the way he talks about it suggests almost that the bell is another thing like the dagger that's drawing him toward him. It's inviting him to do it. Think of the dramatic significance of this moment, of this bell ringing. Here it comes. It's time. And of course it then allows us to finish with another, not paradox, but another kind of sense of opposites. You're going to heaven or you're going to hell, whichever way it goes. So think of the emotions at this point. That's what this is about, the heat of the emotions. And is it the bell that finally makes him resolve to go through with it? Or is it the worry that he will talk himself out of it? If it isn't the bell, what's the impact of the bell as a dramatic device? Think of it as an audience on stage and how he interprets it as a knell, a ringing of the bell that is summoning Duncan either to heaven or to hell. Okay, so very much about the impression we get of Macbeth in this scene, as always. We've had the whole of that Act 1, the complex way he's been presented. Now he's being pushed forward. Think of the Banquo section as well as the dagger soliloquy. The supernatural forces, again, don't just think of the dagger. The dagger is potentially there, but also remember, Banquo is being kept awake, is being given strange dreams of the witches. Is this once again example of people attempting to, of supernatural forces attempting to influence and get inside people? And if so, the fact that Banquo takes the approach of not wanting to go to sleep so he doesn't have to deal with it is an immediate contrast with the way that Macbeth and Lady Macbeth have dealt with it. They've taken on board the supernatural stuff. Banquo is trying to push it as far away as he can. And that leads into this idea of loyalty and ambition in Macbeth and Banquo. Macbeth's attempt to draw Banquo in potentially to his side. Banquo's refusal to take part if it contrasts his ambition. His loyalty. The fact that Banquo's ambition is still high. Why does he want to talk about the Weird Sisters, the witches? Why does he want to have a conversation with Macbeth about them if he doesn't feel ambitious, if he doesn't feel intrigued by what they've said? But for Banquo, that ambition and that loyalty aren't just in conflict. He knows which one seems to be most important. With Macbeth, that's been the problem for him. Loyalty and his ambition don't go together, and he's chosen the ambition. Across the rest of the play, as usual, consider what Macbeth is at this point. At this point of the play, how it fits with what we've seen up to this point. So, if you're watching the play, is this taking us further forward? Is this telling us something about him we didn't see before, or emphasising a part of it? And then, having seen the rest of the play, think: is this what he is now going to stay like? And if not, when it begin to change? When you go back to the supernatural, is this further proof, following from what before, that supernatural forces are interfering? And do they continue to interfere after this point? And if so, does that interference get more or does it get less? With ambition and loyalty in the rest of the play, split Macbeth and Banquo up, I would say. First of all, consider Macbeth's ambition here and then in the rest of the play. and think about how it works as a motivation. And with Banquo, again, does he always show loyalty above ambition? Is that balance always there? Or does it ever change? Think very carefully, particularly about the beginning of Act 3 and his soliloquy and what that might suggest.